Buongiorno. Sono Zeno Rocha, soy brasileño, and that's all the Italian I have for you today. Today we're going to talk about moving to the cloud. We're going to dive into the strategies that you can use and also talk about the opportunities of doing that move. Okay, so I work at the Liferay Cloud division. We work at DXP Cloud, establishing this new cloud foundation for Liferay. And as you know, going to the cloud is not easy. There are projects that just work, right? You start a whole project, you plan properly, and then you make that move and everything goes smoothly. But there are projects that you start, and even though everything seems to be okay in the beginning, and you have been to these projects before, and the team starts great and everything goes fine, there's some problems on the way and things start to go not very good, and then maybe someone is hopeful, no, we can do this right, but things just go downhill and they just succeed, right? We don't want this to happen to our projects, and it's much more common than we think. There's a research that tells us that 62% of cloud migration projects fail. And that's a pretty massive number if you think about it. It's like a lot, right? So how can we prevent this from happening? There are many challenges that comes with that migration, and we need to understand those. This same research, they point to many different aspects. One being a lack of budget and a lack of planning in terms of budget. They thought it was going to cost X, and it was much more than that, 3X, 4X. There's also tooling and what are the decisions that are being made in terms of technology. This is another big factor. Productivity, maybe the team wasn't right, maybe it wasn't the best team to handle that project. Maybe the deployment, the launching of that, everything was fine, and then until the last moment when we were about to go live, there was a problem, something was discovered, and then a stakeholder just kills the project. Or maybe we didn't plan correctly and the database was not set up correctly, and now it's a big issue. The metrics were not being set, the goals were not being set. The cloud provider was not the best one, and we didn't really properly manage that. And another big one is the security, right? Managing security in the cloud, managing the security of your data is very important. So making sure that works is also important. And there are many use cases in the industry of projects that they went to the cloud, everything was fine, but then something happened and it was a big disaster. Netflix being one of them. In December of 2012, Christmas Eve, they made a deployment. They switched to a different cloud provider, and then they had like this massive failure, massive downtime. They were out for many hours. And that was because they didn't plan properly. They didn't have a recovery plan that was ready to go once that happened. Another big use case, Knight. It's a high-frequency trading company in the United States. And they made a deployment to their code. And one of the things that they pointed out is that they failed to test properly the code that they were deploying, and that caused like a massive cost to them. Like $400 million were lost because of that one code that was deployed. They even had to shut down the New York Stock Exchange because of that. So things can be really bad, and that's just some of the cases, right? There's so many companies that have been through those data breaches, like Yahoo, LinkedIn, Home Depot, like you name it. There's so many use cases. And they say that 55% of those projects, they just went over budget. 56% was a lack of expertise, and 52% was a lack of compliance. They have a set of standards that they need to comply, and they couldn't meet those standards. So we don't want that to happen, and this is the talk where we're going to dive into some of the things we can do to mitigate those problems. And we're going to talk about 6 items here. We're going to go into them. Let's start with the number 1, which is a very basic one, just having a solid business use case. Today, when you think about cloud, it seems like that's the only way, right? Going to the cloud is the only way. That's the future, that's what we are doing. And it's very easy to just go with the flow and think that just because everybody's doing, I should do that as well. And maybe that's not the case. Maybe cloud is not for you. There are many valid use cases that cloud is not the best option. But there are also many other that are. I think sometimes we're really confident in our on-premise strategy, and we think that that's gonna be really reliable, and then we find other problems. We find hidden costs that we just not discovered in the beginning. So that's really tricky. And at the end of the day, what we want is to increase revenue and decrease costs, right? So having a business case around that is really important. With cloud, and depending on the tools that you're using, you can identify that, okay, by doing this move, we can increase conversion rates because now we are being faster. We can have a better performance, and now when they're doing the checkout on my commerce application, we can close deals faster, so that leads to more sales. Or if I want to make my team more productive and reduce costs, maybe introducing a new feature, introducing a new tool can help with the deployment time. Managing the different environments can be faster, and now I can publish more code to production faster. So there are many use cases that you have to define, but the important is make a strong business use case and move that forward. Another one is about thinking that all the cloud providers are the same. It's very easy to just think, oh, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, and think that they're all the same and they offer the same products, and that's not very true as well. There are many different categories that you can break your projects into, and different providers into those categories. You have hosting providers, you have providers that are focused on the building part and the building aspect, and you have providers that are focused on the consuming aspect. So if we think about those terms, you can think of infrastructure as a service, PaaS, platform as a service, and software as a service, right? They all deliver different values, and they are there in the user journey for different purposes. And it's not that now you have to understand how each one works and what is the best one, and just say like, okay, infrastructure as a service is the best one, or platform as a service is the best one. It's really a matter of understanding the differences and using each one for the needs that you have. What we have been seeing, talking to many customers, is that they just use a multi-cloud approach. That's what large organizations have been adopting nowadays. For some applications that they need to be faster and more productive, we use this one. For others that are more traditional and we have a lot of legacy, we can use this other one. Or even a hybrid cloud approach, where you can have on-premise and you can have some applications that are there, but you can also connect those applications with new cloud systems that are in your company. That's another one. Now let's talk about a new operating model. Going to the cloud is not about getting one software here, making some changes and putting here and think that that's everything you need to do. There's much more to the whole story. You want to think about what are the workflows that you have, the processes, and the internal operations. Operations in general is one of the biggest challenges, because now you are thinking in a completely different way. How you're managing the data and how you're managing the entire workflow needs to be different. It's a new reality. And just adopting the same strategies that you had before in this new environment is just not going to work. So there are many steps that needs to be done. And that's what we have been seeing with those new companies that are adopting cloud now. We see that first is about mapping how is the cloud strategy looks, how is the infrastructure going to be deployed, what is the infrastructure behind all the work that you're going to do. Redefining the SDLC, the software development lifecycle, understanding the policies, the methods, all the structure and the organization of this software development lifecycle. Ensuring that your DevOps team, your cloud architects, they are really empowering the rest of the team. There's not just like knowledge is solidated and is concentrated in one group of people. You need to spread that out, because once there's an incident, you need people to be able to act and be ready for those times. And reviewing SLAs for data protection. Let's say there's a data breach. Who's responsible for that? How fast are we acting? How are we going to reply about those terms? So this is really important. Setting the privacy standards, it's really important. and optimizing for this new operational cost. Maybe you're transitioning from IT to now marketing or another department that holds the budget for this project. How we're gonna manage that budget also plays a big part. And that whole cycle, it just plays out multiple times. You go over that for one period of time, and then you go over again and go over again, and you keep refining that. Next one is about failing to test properly. And this is like a really blank statement, right? It seems really simplistic. There's much more to testing, and I think we all understand the importance of testing. But this is one of the parts that your cloud architecture is just as good as your testing. And there are many levels, but you cannot cut corners here. There are many companies that they have unit tests while they're coding. They have integration tests, functional tests. Understanding how those tests play out and where you should leverage each one of those is really important. But more than that, how you're integrating those tests, how are they running? Is it like a one-time thing that you run before going to production? Or is this something that you're running during development time? So I love this quote because it talks about like having tests but not having continuous integration is like having a sword but letting it rot, which means it's useless, right? If you have your tests sitting there and it's not really updated, it's not really running all the time, it's not very good, it's not effective. And there are other parts, other attention points that we need to have. Paying attention to the design and the plan of your data migration, how you're moving data, in this case from on-premise to the cloud, what does the process looks like for that data migration, what are the steps, what is the checklist that you're gonna run, and also a disaster recovery plan. This is one of the most important pieces because you wanna have a plan that works, but you also wanna make sure that that plan is constantly being tested. It's really, really common to see companies that they make a move to the cloud and their systems are working fine, and then one day there's a human intervention, someone does one thing in the system, and now like everything goes down, right? Now they need to put that disaster recovery plan in real action. And once they run that, they see that some steps are failing, some things are not really there, the data recovery was not as fast as they planned. So this is a really tricky point. You want to have a plan and run that constantly, like every month, every 3 months, whatever is the cadence that you define, but having that plan in place is really important. You don't want to be in a scenario where things are going bad and now you have to, like, there's a fire, you need to put up with that fire. Another one is about moving everything at once. If you think about launches in general, think about like a rocket launch. There's so many components that goes into that, right? It's just like another level of modularization and components. But to be honest, it's no different than software in general. We have like so many different layers, so many different components, and we need to be sure those components are in place. So knowing that each component needs to be in a certain place and needs to be prepared in a certain way for this cloud migration is also crucial. There are you can have many systems in your company, right? Imagine you have a customer portal, a public website, and then a partner portal. And you can also have like legacy systems. If you have a ERP that is running like forever in the company, and you have like a database that nobody touches for years because there's a lot of things over there and we really don't know what to do there. So where should you start if you're doing a cloud project? Well, it can be really tricky to make that decision. You probably can start with the newer systems or the older ones, and maybe the newer ones are easier to move, but the older ones, they're gonna bring more value, so you have to decide that. Or maybe we should start with the top systems, the ones that are like in the front end of the user, and then we go to the bottom later, or we go to the bottom first, top later. Or we just go with the smaller, the easiest projects to migrate, the ones that are quick wins. Or we go to the bigger ones and But the truth is that there's no real answer to this. This year, like, I was in a meeting with like this big bank company in New York, and there was a lot of discussion in that meeting about like, okay, we're going to the cloud. What is the system that we're gonna migrate first? They had like 3 different systems. And for me, it was pretty obvious. Like, okay, this is a big bank. Let's first move with the system that it's a smaller system, a modern one, so less pieces to move. And for me, that was so obvious. But for them, that was not the case. They had like a very critical one, super business critical system. And they said like, oh, we think this one is the best one to move. Because by doing this one, we can prove that the entire project works, and now we can sell to other stakeholders this idea, and then we can do the rest of the work. So there's really no right answer to this. What matters is that you try to define an MVP and follow that MVP and deliver value no matter what the size of this MVP is. You can try, and we were referring to this earlier today, that you can try this two-speed IT model, where you have the systems that you already have in place, and you maybe have legacy code as well, and legacy applications. And you can move with them in different directions. With the projects that are more modern, a better technology stack, you can move pretty fast and have high productivity teams taking care of those. And then other projects, you can move at a different pace. And there's no problem with that. It's just, you don't have to have like a high speed, high productivity for everything that you're doing in your company. You just have to be strategic and make decisions based on what's important right now and how we can move forward with those. Next one is about cloud security. And this one is a really sensitive topic. Cloud security is a shared responsibility with the customer and the cloud provider. And if you think about any of the applications that you use daily, right? Being like Google or Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, doesn't matter the application. You are the customer, right? You are just using that. And they are the providers. And it's really easy to think of security as something that, oh, it was their fault or it was my fault. But at the end of the day, it's a shared responsibility. They can give you like a sign-up form that has tips for having a strong password. They can limit the number of characters and make rules to enforce those strong password policies. They can even add 2-factor authentication, and you can enable that for your account. But if you get your phone and you leave it open over here, someone can just grab it and access, right? So it's a shared responsibility, and we need to be really careful about that. There are many different levels to cloud security, and there are different things that we need to consider with that. One, identity and access management. Think about all the access that you're going to have between different systems, and what is the governance of that system. Like, what are the roles, how we're managing roles, how are we changing roles as time goes. Sometimes you're just like a contributor and now you're an admin, and maybe you need like read-only roles now. So having a history that tracks that change is important. Network security is another level. You need monitoring tools to identify what's going on with the applications. Threat detection tools that can be inside your systems, inside your servers, that are identifying what are the access that are being tried. Is there a brute force attack going on that I don't even know? So those tools are really important because they can identify proactively if there's a breach or if there's a compromise somewhere. Data protection, what is the encryption that we are using? Is it end-to-end encryption or not? What is the data loss prevention that we have? How is the retention of my data? Are we keeping certain backups for 10 days, 30 days, a year, or indefinitely? Are we doing vulnerability scans to make sure that if there's something there that needs to be addressed, we are looking at that. So data protection is also key. And then we go to another level, application security. Now you're thinking, what is my firewall? How I'm going to I'm going to secure my application, what is the flow that goes into all the different systems that we have. Visibility and intelligence, knowing what is the different correlations that can happen. If there's one event here, what can be happening on the other side? How is the integration looks like? If I'm doing a hybrid cloud approach where I have on-prem and cloud, how I'm detecting that there's nobody accessing that connection and that integration. And workload-centric, knowing how I'm going to apply new patches. We are in the software world. There's always a new version being released for everything that we do. So how we can apply patches in a way that is sustainable, and how we are auditing that the different controls that we have are in place is also crucial. So we have like a whole talk on information security. It's a topic that we have investing a lot at Liferay, and it's today at 12:30, so I really recommend you going. Johnny, our operations manager, he flew from Los Angeles here to be here to talk about this, so I really recommend that talk. And now, all these things, they contribute to a successful cloud project. And I love this phrase from Gartner because it talks about no longer it's about hardware and software. Now it's about delivering services that accomplish business needs. And for me, I come from a technology background. I used to discuss if Java was better than C#, if React was better than Angular. So you think about all those technologies and which one is better, and there's all these debates going on about what is the best framework and things like that. But at the end of the day, nothing really matters. What matters is delivering the business needs that you are in the market to deliver. If your customers are happy, then you accomplish your goals. So that's why we created DXP Cloud. At the end of the day, that's what we want. We want companies to focus on what matters and not just handling all those cases. There are many different challenges that we're tackling, from network configuration, servers, performance, the operational systems, upgrading things, just like really low-level challenges that every single company needs to think, but also a little bit higher levels of complexity. Like, once you have Liferay DXP, now there are many different things that you need to consider. How are you setting up clustering? How is that going? How is the installation looks like? How are you monitoring that? How are the backups? What is the scaling strategy? How are you fine-tuning all the portal property settings that you have to make sure you have a really performant portal? And even higher levels of complexity. We want to just offer something that can help you not only technically, but also in the workflow, in your operations. There are some companies that are really advanced in terms of DevOps operations, but then there are others that are not in that maturity level yet. So we have a very nice software development workflow that helps you navigate between the different environments and be productive. So we have tons of different features on DXP Cloud, from security, like ATPS out of the box, high availability, we have self-healing, zero downtime deployments, health monitoring, advanced monitoring. We have performance tools, app management, like setting up custom domains, changing environment variables, CI, CD, team collaboration. So there's a lot of things. And we have a whole nother section tomorrow now that we're going to go really deep into those features. But for those of you who never seen DXP Cloud before, I just don't want to leave you with just not seeing the product. So I'm just going to dive into three different parts of DXP Cloud that are really exciting. One is builds and deployments. So as we were talking earlier, we have the software development lifecycle. And that software development lifecycle helps you navigate through the environments. So you can imagine your code, and you're hosting that code in a Git repository. It can be GitHub, but it can also be GitLab, Bitbucket, GitHub Enterprise, whatever the Git repository is. From there, we send our code to a continuous integration tool like Jenkins, and then we send to DXP Cloud. So the way this looks like is I have my environment here, I have my production environment, and I can just navigate to builds. And on the builds, I can see all the builds that I made. Everything that my development team produced, I can go and see. And we have this concept of building once and deploying everywhere. It's very common to hear developers say, oh, it works on my machine, you know? So we all heard that at some point. And there are cases that, oh, it works on UAT, it works on the dev environment, but once we put in production, there was a surprise that we didn't account for. So with DXP Cloud, we want to fix that problem. And the way we fix is by having those builds, which are artifacts that you can move between environments. So it's this one thing that is not going to change. And once you make this transition along your process, you can see it. So in this case, I'm just going to pick the latest build, 139, and I'm going to deploy this build. Now I can see everything about this build. I can see what are the services that are running. I can see who made that change, when it was made, and all the details. And then I can choose which environment I want to move to. In this case, I'm on dev, and I want to move to production. So now let's move to, no, UAT actually. Let's move to UAT. And okay, I choose that, I deploy, and now I can see that this deployment is happening and it's in progress. That's pretty nice. Now I can also go to deployments and see every environment that I have, and I can see what's exactly running in that environment. It's no longer that questioning of, okay, what's running on UAT, what's running on this one? You can see right away in one screen. Here we can see on UAT our services being deployed over there. The other one is auto-scaling. So once you are in production, once you are live, there are cases that you can have a lot of traffic, or sometimes you can have not as much traffic. Maybe it's New Year's and you don't have that much traffic. So you need to be able to auto-scale up and down. And this is something we offer on DXP Cloud. So in this case, we're going to our Liferay DXP service. And now I can enable auto-scaling. I only have one instance running right now. But if I enable that, and now there's more traffic happening, I can increase and add like automatically without doing nothing. I have now 5 instances of Liferay running at the same time on the same cluster. There's nothing you had to configure, just one click button and that's it. And last is this disaster recovery. We have 2 different disaster recoveries. Automatic disaster recovery and cross-region disaster recovery. The automatic one, we already do a lot for you. There are cases that you're not going to even use the cross-region in any case. The automatic is like you don't have to do any intervention yourself. You have this out of the box without doing nothing. So how this works is pretty much this. Let's say I have a project that is running on US West 1 in Oregon, US. Inside this server, you have my application running. And automatically what we do is we replicate your server into 3 different availability zones within that same region. So if something goes down in one building gets fire, okay, you have 2 other buildings that are intact and they're gonna have the data there. The other one is cross-region. Cross-region, you can like imagine Oregon, right? And now there's like a huge earthquake that destroys the whole west coast of the United States. You still don't want to lose your data, right? Okay, it's a big disaster, but you still don't want to lose your data. So how we prevent that? We can have a disaster recovery region in another environment in another region. In this case, London. We have other data centers like Frankfurt, Australia, South America, Brazil. So we can have those options. And now I can just point to that environment. So here I can see the list of all my environments. I have Oregon, and I have one in Frankfurt, and then I have one in London. My DR, my disaster recovery, is a replicated environment from production running in another region. So I'm really happy to be here again in Italy for another year. It's super nice to hear Brian talking about the last 15 years of Liferay. I have been at Liferay for a very long time, so it's really exciting to see how our products change so much with time, and still is the same core values that you see in the product. Just like the company, I've seen, like, I worked in different offices, I've seen the company transform so much, but at the same time, I see the same values, the same people working so hard. And the reason why we created GXP Cloud is for the next 15 years too. Like, we still want to grow Liferay even more than what we are right now, and we think this cloud product can help. So thank you so much.